into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action. Well, and I will rest by all the leaves upon paper. Anyone else? Or just me? Enter into action.